Okay, looks like we're good to go. Vincente, you want to start us off?
Yes. Buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a la reunión de hoy. Si desean escuchar la sesión de hoy traducida del inglés al español, pueden oprimir el globo que aparece en la parte de abajo de la pantalla, seleccionar el idioma español, también oprima el botón que dice Mute Audio Original. Si están usando un teléfono celular, opriman los tres puntitos, seleccionen el idioma de español y de nuevo opriman el botón que dice Mute Audio Original. Gracias.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Brian, did you want to go around the room like we did last time, or how do you want to handle it?
I think there's enough people that we should probably skip the introduction.
Okay, so I'll say hello and then shut up. So my name is Steve Kleppen. I'm the Planning and Zoning Director for the city. Joining me is Brian Baker from my office, and I believe Louis Schulman, who is the chair of the Zoning Commission, is on. I thought I saw Galen Will's name. She's also a member of the Zoning Commission, and then I'll turn it directly over to Brian Wright and Jessica Wilson from TPUDC, who will be leading you through the evening.
All right. Thank you so much for
Brian, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I note that Nicholas Cantor is also here, another member of the Zoning Commission.
Oh,
great.
Thanks. Sorry.
Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no problem. So thanks so much for being here with us tonight. I'm Brian Wright. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative, and I have Jessica Wilson here with me, who's the project manager for our team. And we are leading the consulting group to update the zoning ordinance with all of you. So we've been having a series of meetings so far. We have talked about development and character. We've talked about thoroughfares and connectivity. And this evening, we're here to talk about sustainability. And the format of these meetings, if you're new to the Charrette process, this is your first meeting, it's pretty much a free-form conversation. We're just trying to learn from all of you. We've been doing our homework and reading and researching your existing ordinance and your citywide plan and other things that are background information, if you will. But from the perspective of really getting started on drafting the ordinance, we're at the beginning of that process. So we're still in the learning mode. So we really count on all of you, the locals, to teach us about Norwalk and about what the issues are that you're facing, what things are working well, what are your interests, what would you like to change for the future. And insofar as we can, orient the discussion around the framework of sustainability and how that could impact zoning ordinances, that will be helpful for us. Just to clarify as well, if you didn't hear the opening presentation the other day, the scope of our work is focused on the zoning, and so the zoning can only do a certain number of things. All the things that we talk about assume that the new ordinance will be enforced. So we're not here to really talk about enforcement issues. We also are, when you're looking at zoning, it's all about these are the rules and regulations. What are developers and builders required to do in the pursuit of building something in Norwalk. And so when it comes to sustainability, it's a little bit tricky because there are limitations on what we can require people to do from a state and federal level as well. And so we try to, in communities where it's important to them, include as much as we can in the ordinance. But because the ordinance is actual, it's not a guideline, it is the law. It is important for it to be written as such. And so having sort of aspirational concepts and we hope you'll kind of consider doing this or that isn't really found in a properly written zoning ordinance. So as we look towards including sustainability in a more meaningful way in the new ordinance, just keep those things in mind, but don't let them limit you. So we need to know what your interests are and then we can figure out what is and isn't possible. So dream big, and I'll throw it to all of you. Whoever would like to go first, if you could raise your hand. There at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions button. You click on that, you'll see a hand raise tool or button. If you click on that, raise your hand and you get right in line, and we'll call on you. So who's first? Jamie got it in first in the buzzer. All right, if you could unmute yourself and tell us who you are and what your interest is.
Hi, I'm Jamie Sinclair. I live in, I had to look up what my neighborhood is called. Center Norwalk is what it's generally considered, but near where West Rocks Road is, kind of close to Cranberry Park. I'm sorry, I did miss the initial meeting or kickoff meeting. So I was wondering if you could just go back over exactly, is it that the ordinance isn't drafted yet and you all are drafting it and soliciting our feedback in connection with our priorities? Or is it already drafted and this is just still an information gathering exercise?
No, the ordinance is not drafted. You have a current zoning ordinance, but we're updating it right now. The comprehensive plan or the citywide plan, is adopted, and it has a stated vision and for the future and land uses and those sorts of things. And so what we're doing right now is really, writing that new ordinance that is the implementation of that comprehensive vision for the future. Got
it. And what types of things are appropriate for us to suggest? Is it just literally like a wish list of what specifically for this meeting? Is it like just what we're hoping for in terms of like green spaces and parks, or is it anything, or is it only in connection with when developers can, like when they can build on land? Could you just sort of help me out?
Yeah, so it isn't so much, like, oh, we'd like to have a new city park. That's more dealt with in the comprehensive plan, more in a park master plan. This is specifically focused on the, what people can do on their property. So when you're looking at a developer building something, what sorts of sustainability components or aspects would you like to see included? Open space can be a part of the new development for sure, but it's limited to if you think about somebody improving or developing a piece of property.
Okay, thanks. I just needed all that background information.
Sure. Yeah. Tanner, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, everybody. I think we met yesterday morning at the Streets and Connectivity Charrette. But just by way of quick introduction again, I'm the chair of the Norwalk Bike Walk Commission. It's an advisory commission to the city. I think there's a lot to be talked about here, and I'm not qualified to talk about a lot of it. But I think that no discussion of sustainability when it comes to the city would be complete without a mention of the relationship between dense development and carbon emissions. This is a very strong correlation that's been studied in the field of urban planning, and simply put, the denser the people live, the lower their carbon footprint is. And this is for a variety of reasons. It's for reasons relating to transportation, which is what I'm most familiar with, right? The less that people drive, especially the less that they drive cars with internal combustion engines, then that is a huge part of their carbon footprint. But also when it comes to heating, right? When you can heat a building with more units in it, you can do that more efficiently than you can heat a single family home. So I would implore the new zoning code to be as friendly to denser development as possible. Personally, I think that the row house would be a very elegant addition to Norwalk, especially in places like South Norwalk that have room for some infill development, but also elsewhere. It maintains a quaint suburban feel while also being a lot more walkable, kind of reaching that critical mass of density where people can do a lot of their errands on foot, and allowing people also to still have a backyard. I am a little less educated about this, but I think that in order to achieve that, in a lot of places in Norwalk, we would need laxer setback requirements, both on the sides of lots and on the front and back. But obviously, we have a lot of dense development going on right now that is bigger in scale, with new projects, especially in the transit-oriented districts. And that's great too. That obviously hits the emission goal, the carbon footprint goals that I'm talking about. But I think on a larger scale, seeing more of Norwalk that has kind of this gentle density of maybe 3 stories on smaller lot sizes, that would go a long way to making Norwalk a more environmentally sustainable place to live. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Who's next? Wendy.
Hi, my name's Wendy DiChristina, and I live in Rowayton. And I love the bike walk initiative, and I generally agree with Tanner. Although I do have a concern in Rowayton where it seems like the denser buildings, the condos, leave no green space. And I feel like the sustainability of our whole neighborhood relies on us being able to have water move away from the houses quickly. And the more paved over surfaces we have, the worse off we are. So I'd like to see the encouragement of more grass, more open space, more natural landscaping than we currently have. Not really a sustainability issue, but my issue.
Thanks. All right, Lynn. You're muted. There you go.
So I'm watching my 3-year-old right now, so please excuse any interjections that he adds. This is the first meeting I was able to attend, but I did try to rewatch the video, at least the first video. I was able to make it through from the first meeting. So I don't know if I'm repeating anything from the second meeting. Except the start of the second meeting, I did see that Michael was really trying to campaign for the form-based codes, and I don't know how far that conversation went, but I would like to add in a vote for that too. And then trying to get into sustainability, I would like to see when you're planning for, the last person mentioned runoff, when you're planning for how much of a lot can be hardscaped or softscaped, that I know in other towns when they are writing their code for what counts as pervious or impervious, sometimes it's so simplified to the point that if it's a man-made surface, it doesn't count, even if it can be pervious, like those pavers, those concrete pavers that grass grows up in the middle, like those won't count. I would hope that the way it's written doesn't exclude strategies like that. My other thought is, as a parent of a young child right now, trying to take him for walks, I'm really concerned about air quality. And we have the highways that pass through Norwalk 95 and the Merritt, and that I would love it if in the zones surrounding them that promotion of greenery to absorb sound, absorb some of that air pollution was really promoted instead of building as densely right up to the highway. And then I don't know how much zoning can get into light pollution restrictions on new buildings, in trying to encourage better moderation of that. So those are my points.
Great, thanks. Who's next? Tanner, are you clapping or raising your hand?
I guess it is. It does look like I'm clapping, doesn't it? That was meant to be a raised hand. Just a brief. I want to also add to the discussion on drainage, because that is clearly important. The pavers where the grass grows up in the middle, I wish that I knew the term for that, but I don't. I spent a couple of years living in Germany, and I saw that all over the place. Parking lots that were also very easy to drain because half of it was grass and half of it was pavers. And when I first saw that, I was mystified as to why we don't do that more in the United States. I also ought to be more educated on this, but to the extent that zoning can play a role in making that more commonplace, I think not only is it better for drainage, but it looks nicer, right? It brings more greenery into your space than just like black asphalt.
All right, awesome. Diane.
So meet again. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having this particular topic focused. As I've said in the daytime charrette, I also wish that the planning and zoning, maybe Lou Schulman and others could also think about having a discussion about affordable housing. But for tonight, I wanted to make some suggestions related to, of course, green infrastructure. I am one who really appreciates and likes the value of overlay zones, and that would be germane to this exercise. What I mean by overlay zones would be taking a look at the assets and resources of our city, and we have so many wonderful ones, and determining which ones are in crisis or in threat, under threat, either due to climate change with flooding and rising sea level, or drought due to extreme weather. So that we would take a look, as an example, about 22% of the city of Norwalk are still on private drinking water wells and septic systems. And so what I am proposing, you all take a look this winter with the help of the staff, is to take a look at potential for let's say a drinking water protection overlay zone, where there would, if additional housing or additional buildings occur in an area where we have an aquifer, which is a geologic unit, there's a geologic unit that retains water. I'm being very simplistic here. There's different types, but you have both bedrock aquifers and we have sand and gravel aquifers. And both of those are very, very precious and sensitive to fluctuations in extreme weather and overuse. So that's just one example. The other is the example of vegetative buffers. Taking a look at a map and our zones, when any zoning activity takes place, doesn't have to be new build, it could be a renovation, and just have an overlay zone that is a buffer protection zone. So anyone building within those zones must do certain things that enhance and protect the rivers, the streams, ponds. Right now, with our Inland Wetland Agency, and which is mostly what they don't do a lot of conservation, very little. We're talking about that now in that meeting. But the thing is, when and if someone is building even a porch, that's when the staff and the commission can discuss increasing the buffer. I'm saying for our zoning rewrite, let's take a look at areas where we need to protect and prepare for climate change. So that's a resiliency effort. And I know some other cities and towns that are doing this. They're expanding their buffers and ensuring that they are made up of materials that are not necessarily only man-made, they are vegetative buffers with the right kind of vegetation that retain both the soil, so we don't have as much erosion and need to dredge as often, but also they clean up the water, they cool down the water. That we can do, and this could be done in this case. As far as green infrastructure goes, I also feel that for areas where we have had some surface water problems and stormwater issues and flooding, that we propose a green infrastructure zone in certain parts of our inner city, both the Wall Street area and South Norwalk area, where if someone wants to build a structure, they must put a living roof on top or use a lot of surface green infrastructure. Lately, I've noticed for very large developments, most recently the Norwalk Housing Authority, right near West Norwalk, they put in a small kind of token rain garden. And of course, all of our new development does improve the stormwater quality. Also, with expensive underground systems, they retain the water on site. So that is an improvement. But I feel our city, to be truly resilient, can state that if someone wants to build a building, they have to use a green roof. And I don't mean a potted plant and a bar on top like we have at the mall. That is not a green roof. I'm speaking about succulent plants that are lightweight until they absorb the water, because that is a way of not only removing the water that's down to the ground, but also it also insulates buildings, it cools the buildings, it retains moisture and reduces temperature. So that we would take a look at areas of Norwalk that are having flooding problems, sometimes due to the age of the systems. I mean, we can't replace all the pipes and make them a lot wider all at once. So some of these areas, there would be an overlay zone. And if someone wants to build, they have to help us handle climate change for the future. Lastly, the last overlay zone I'd like us to take a look at is energy, renewables, and efficiency zones. Like they have one in Bridgeport down near the water where they use renewables. I believe that if we take a look on a map of our geology and the areas where solar gain is enough that every building in that section of town could handle solar panels, and I'm not talking just about solar on roof, but solar on the ground, carports, and the like, that anyone that wants to build, including the city of Norwalk, when they build schools, they not may, but must use renewable energy in the form of solar, or they would use geothermal if the geologic structures, and you could just look on maps. We have resource maps. The state of Connecticut has them for free. And then you have an overlay zone. So anyone building in that area must, not may, maybe we give them an out. Okay. I think that would be a really great thing for our city, for our sustainability. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that very specific list. Galen, unmute.
Yeah, I have two comments. What Diane was talking about, people living with wells and septic systems, we have a well and we have a septic system. Oops.
And you have a bell.
Sorry about that. And we back up on the 5 Mile River. So I can't imagine that the septic systems of all the people on both sides of the 5 Mile River aren't leaching in some way into the 5 Mile River. That's number one. So I'd love it if we could have, city sewer. The other thing is we have wells, and I cannot believe that the water is really clean. They test when you buy a house that there are no biologic contaminants, but there could be a cleaners in Wilton, with seeping into the groundwater. So, it just strikes me that it's in the middle of an urban area. A well for your drinking water is kind of crazy when you have, city water makes sense where someone's looking at the quality of the water. But I do want to agree with Diane about the solar panels. I remember when a school project came before the zoning commission, Diane appeared and she was saying they should put solar panels over the parking lot. And I wish I could dial back time and change my vote, because I think she was absolutely right. They should have put solar panels over that parking lot. The city of Norwalk, just City Hall has a huge parking lot. If you had solar panels over the top of those parking lots, your cars wouldn't get hot, park there all day, and they'd be producing a considerable amount of energy. So I think the roofs, parking areas, all of that should be considered for solar panels, and I'd really like to see that happen.
Great. One thing that I would suggest too is, and it's probably implicit in these suggestions, but there can't be a one size fits all solution, because some of your areas, for instance, are very thankfully heavily vegetated, you know, certain areas, certain neighborhoods and things. And so in those areas, you know, solar wouldn't be very practical. You wouldn't want to do what it would take to make solar work, which would be taking down the trees.
Yeah, I can't have a solar panels because we've got too much shade. So my house is not appropriate for it. We tried to look into that, but you know, I don't want to cut the trees down. That would be
Exactly. So, but I'm sure that was implicit in all that you all were saying, but I just wanted to make that known, because as we look at all of the different aspects of the problems we're trying to solve with the zoning ordinance, you'll hear me say that so often, that there isn't any one size fits all, and that's how we, you know, really honor and respect and bring forth all that is unique about Norwalk. And so it's exciting that you have so much that's unique. So, Scott, your hand is up.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks. Hey, one of the things that Diane actually made me think of it, that it relates to, so I'm in the East Norwalk area. So while I love Norwalk, I care more about my area. And what she made me think of was, we've got this East Norwalk Village TOD zone that I think you all actually even helped weigh in on for Mr. Kleppen and team a few months ago. But one of the things that I had noticed in the memo that you had written was to make sure that we had a green sustainable element as part of that, as a way to get points or amenities. And so I appreciated that a lot. And I think they took that to heart. And I guess my one or two concerns as it relates to that is, when I was looking at the memo to Mr. Kleppen, from you to the commission, the first unresolved issue you had was point system. Is it too restricting? And so I thought, oh my God, we're already ready to give this whole thing away. You know, and maybe we give people, you know, double the points for rooftop solar or what have you, as opposed to actually making them part of, like Diane was suggesting, part of any new development that comes into the area. So instead of treating it like a cap and trade system, where it's like, hey, if you add green infrastructure, then we'll let you either add density, you know, to smaller unit sizes on a per unit basis for renters, or add elevation to the building. It seems like we have an opportunity here to actually create that as part and parcel of any new development to this town, rather than, you know, create what seems to me to be an artificial construct where we say, okay, you can limit a building to 2.5 stories, but then, you know, wink, wink, if you add a rooftop solar panel, you can make it 3.5 stories. We could say limit it to 2.5 stories and add solar panels, or you know, other greening elements like Diane mentioned. So just wanted to put that out there for consideration. I know there's a meeting, I think next Monday maybe, to review that, but figured in the context of this larger Norwalk discussion, it's worthy to bring up here.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing to discuss, because as we look at some of these things that we tend to not be able to require as high a standard for things like, you know, sustainability, or sometimes aesthetics, or, you know, whatever the state allows. The next thought is, okay, well, we'll use an incentive system, right? And so we'll allow people extra X, Y, and Z if they do these things. The challenge is that when you are taking a sophisticated, nuanced approach to zoning, where you're focused on the form and the character of the place, and, you know, not simply just preserving and protecting, but that is part of it. But even, you know, having an intended, you know, future vision for the place, when you start incentivizing things with additional height or density or whatever the additional thing may be. Height is the one that comes to mind because it's the most obvious, has an effect on the physical form of the place. And so if the form is intended to be in a particular area, let's say between 2 and 4 stories, and now you say, but if you do all these things that we really want, you can get an extra story or 2. Well, then you're like, well, okay, well, we don't want it to be higher than we want it to be because of the character thing. And so I know we'll just lower the zoning there and then they can get up to it. And so now you're kind of like, you're never really getting to where you meant to be from a character perspective. So I tend to really try to have people focus on just requiring what you want done. Getting the character you want, tell people what the standards are, and then, you all as a community can decide, you have to figure out what are the likely impacts of having additional requirements on a developer. One of the things could be you have an influx of green-minded developers who have been dying for a community like you, who's really looking for and expecting and demanding green building and sustainability as part of development. The other possible outcome is that you slow down or stifle development because those green-minded developers aren't as readily available as the ones who want to do the lowest common denominator. And so then you say, well, if it's going to slow development, is that a problem for us or not? Maybe we're financially in a position where it's not a big deal for us as a community, and we can, that's a good way to help control and have smart growth happen. In some communities we work in, they aren't that fortunate, and so they're much more concerned about their tax base and the bottom line and all that. And so they don't feel as comfortable making those types of requirements. And so they end up most often not getting what they want from the character, from the sustainability standpoint. So you have to just think about all those trade-offs. But at the end of the day, whatever we're allowed to do per state law and whatever you all as a community are willing to accept, then we can write the zoning to accommodate that. Lynn, see your hand up there. Can you unmute, Lynn? There you go.
Yes. So I appreciate what you just said, all of your, how you went over that it's not necessarily possible to do the trade-offs because then you won't get the result you desire. But I think if the trade-offs is the best maybe we can do, because maybe I'm a pessimist, but I think if we don't do a halfway point of a trade-off of if you do solar panels, if you do a green roof, you get something better. Maybe I'm a bit of a pessimist that I don't really believe that you're going to write the zoning to say that everybody needs green roofs, everybody needs solar. Isn't it better to still have something, a middle ground of asking, of trying to promote it? I know that zoning is difficult because you either have to say you have to do this or not. You can't really encourage. But that's why I think you still should encourage the trade-offs of the additional height if you do, or as your example was, if you do the green features, because otherwise maybe you just don't go far enough at all. If you're not willing to say everybody has to do this because that's too burdensome, do you not get anywhere? That's what I want.
Sure. So one thing that I'll say is when it comes to the trade-offs, one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure I mentioned it is because I wasn't around at this time, but I understand that there was quite a bit of passionate discussion about building heights around the TOD stations. And so knowing that was quite a controversial topic, and maybe it was simply just, well, yeah, like we were saying we don't want it so high, but no one offered us, green features. And if they had said, hey, you can have green features, then we'll take 20 stories. So just in some ways the building around the TOD could be like your physical real world bar graph. you know, you can see how passionate you guys are about sustainability based on how high, you know, buildings can go in a certain area. I'm joking, but you know, in some ways, that's why I felt it was important to mention that to you all. So, Scott, go ahead.
Sure. And just, you know, thinking through that further, I get that, but I also recognize what Diane had raised, which is that while green features may have been established for the mall, it's like, here's a potted plant. We did our job. And so I feel like, you know, either if we are going to be serious about this, let's go beyond the quote unquote pollinator pathway, which based on what I saw, I have a pollinator pathway in my backyard, so could build the next Hilton Hotel on my property. So I guess what I'm saying is there's got to be some teeth to enforcement to this thing. There's got to be some skin in the game from the developers, and there has to be some way after the fact for us to hold them responsible, hold them accountable, so that it's not like, well, we did a half-assed job, but you know, someone in the city could check the box and we could say we tried. And Lynn, I get what you're saying. Like, you know, it's like, is it incrementally better than not having anything at all? And I believe that's true if it's incrementally better. But I also feel like, you know, with the memo that I saw, it looked like we were ready to sell it out before we ever started. You know, is this too stringent before we even started the debate with the public? And so that's where I was like, we can do better. We should do better. We can do better. And that's all I'm asking.
Sure. Yeah, I always talk about, I get concerned, you know, people tend to do what I call pre-negotiating. You know, you're anticipating the preferences of your audience, but at the end of the day, people like to have a negotiation. And so if you start off sort of anticipating, you don't let people have their pound of flesh, if you will. So I see Steve's hand popped up. Steve, do you have something to add?
Sure, and I don't want to turn this into East Norwalk TOD discussion since we're going to do that Monday night, but I think a couple things to go. I think it was kind of danced around a little bit. Is it's hard to go. So if you have a base zoning now, which allows a certain density and a certain height, it's difficult to then throw on additional requirements on top of that and then expect someone to follow that. Also, if you have an area that's underperforming now, I think then you're further exacerbating that situation and not you're not going to get the results you want in the long run. So for the East Norwalk specifically, we came up with a point system. Now, I'm not saying that the point system as it's currently drafted is finalized or perfect. I think we in-house looked at some things and think that if you get over a half an acre of property, it's viable. Under a half an acre, we don't know if it's going to work. So we need feedback from not only the public, but also from architects and developers who are going to say, this is just not feasible. It's not going to work. It's not going to work from an economic standpoint, and it's not going to achieve the results you want. So that's kind of what we're hoping to achieve next week. I think that the idea of does it have teeth or will it have enforcement? Yes, because when this is granted through special permit, all the approvals and plans that accompany that application are part of that record. So if someone is approved for certain things and then 5 years down the road, they remove something that was required as part of an approval, then that's in violation of that approval. And then it's incumbent upon the city to enforce that mechanism through whatever means that they have available.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Diane.
All right. Good discussion. I wish we had hours, but of course we don't. I just wanted to clarify what I had spoken about very briefly. The first is absolutely, if you have an area, and we do in Norwalk, of heavily wooded areas, that's where you would not have a solar overlay zone. But we have plenty of areas where they've been denuded for a long time. And what is happening is all of those rooftops and parking lots are reflecting back, causing a increased heat, not cleaning, it's not helping us decarbonize Norwalk. And so these overlay zones, I don't consider them barriers, Brian. And this is not the first time that TPUDC has kind of shaken the rattle about, hey, don't add more barriers to the development community. I would say that at least many people I know on this call would like, if a developer doesn't want to help improve our water quality, our air quality, reduce the heat island effect with their buildings and structures, then let them go to another town, because there are plenty of developers that if they know that they'd be appreciated, and I am all for reasonable incentives, they will build here. This is not the first time where I've heard either, well, the consultants, you're talking about kind of saber rattling. If we add some of these, you're calling them barriers, I'm calling them opportunities. And the thing is, there are many cities and towns throughout the nation and in Europe that have done this, and they have a cleaner and greener community. They have no trouble getting developers, because the development community, of which I'm a professional environmental consultant, sometimes I work for developers, and as long as they know what's expected of them, they want to be good neighbors, they want to be known, and it's very marketable to have a green development, especially with the younger people, but also with others. So I was quite saddened that with the TOD that they didn't have, they had incentives only where it's may, not must. I would love us to tweak that so that at least some of the sustainability and resilient standards that were put together, and I think was a wonderful exercise, but many of us think this city, it's long overdue to have across the board mandates for certain green building design standards, including some green infrastructure with certain parking lot areas. I'm not saying across the board as far as every lot and piece of acreage throughout the city, because some can't handle it geographically, geologically. I'm saying let's give it a hard look at the actual, at the actual resource. We have people that we hire, and we have staff that know how to do this, and let's match what could make in that area greener and cleaner. So it would be an overlay zone, for instance, temperature reduction. So there are certain areas of town, and there are measurements that have been done for free already about heat island effect. Well, that's where there would be a forest overlay zone. There are now a lot of grants available because this is popular and people are starting to get it. So we would look at the streets in Norwalk, especially South Norwalk and Old Norwalk, where there's no trees. It's hotter than hell on a summer day, but also there's no protection in the winter. Let's make that a zone. And people that's the way other towns do it. For air quality, the same, where we have residential communities. As an example, South Norwalk on Meadow Street, we have a lot of residential right across the street from really, we're not going to go into enforcement, but we have dusty contractor yards and other places. Well, we would like to have trees, the right kind of trees that absorb certain kinds of pollutants and provide sound barriers, as I think Lynn said, others on this, let's match the zone to that. And that's not a barrier to development. Why should Norwalk be the dumping ground and the hole in the donut? Brian Wright and TPUDC, you don't know that Norwalk used to be called the hole in the donut. Well, we've been trying, especially recently with Mayor Rilling, to try to get out of that unflattering. And lastly, on water quality, while I do appreciate Galen's discussion about feeling that almost everyone, at least on her street that have a well and septic, that they should put in sewer and city water, be careful what you wish for, because there is lots of case law where when you add a sewer, then there's a reason for more density. So the thing is, you have to balance and check and balance. And quite frankly, that type of thought was tried on Newtown Avenue in the Cranberry section where I live, where Mr. Frank Zullo, rest in peace, consulted with a Westport lawyer who wanted to build in Westport. So they claimed that the septic systems were all failing on Newtown Avenue. Well, we did our homework as a neighborhood association and found that was a lie. And so because of the fact that what is needed, and I would love to speak with Galen offline, we need the city, and especially Alexis, who is on this call, to have a more robust education program to preserve our underground drinking water quality and preserve. A lot of us are talking about a septic system mandatory pump out ordinance. I tried it years ago and people balked, but I think now we have our river people and Alexis's group. People are now, it's more popular. So let's talk about educating people so that their systems don't fail and we won't need to extend sewer and water. Definitely people should be sampling their drinking water wells, and the health department is supposed to educate people about how to do so.
Yes, so that's a good point. The one of the things though, as a consultant and somebody, you know, from away, we feel it's important for us as the community is considering making decisions is, you know, if you're having to weigh, you know, what your options are, what you want to do, it's important for us because not everybody spends as much time thinking about these topics or knows anything about development or zoning. And so, you know, when we work in places, I remember when we came to Burlington, Vermont to work on their zoning ordinance in their downtown, years before we got there, they had decided, you know what, we want to have more commercial in our downtown. We want to do that. And say they had amended their zoning ordinance to require 50% of every building in downtown it had to be 50% commercial. So 50% of the square footage had to be commercial. Well, the recession came, and even before the recession came, it just wasn't, the market wasn't there for it. And so they couldn't keep them filled, and the zoning wouldn't allow the developer to put residential in there. And so it had an unintended consequence, a ripple effect. And so from my perspective, when we're looking at things that, you know, are changing a paradigm, and let's just, you know, not use sustainability as the example, but any paradigm that you're considering changing, what you heard me say was, first, you may find that you have developers who are very green focused flocking to your community because you've added these standards. Then I said the second option is you may slow down development, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And so I would say that I'm not cautioning you all towards any, you know, direction one way or the other. It's for you to decide what you want to do and what your priorities are. But recognizing, like you, Diane, we work for private developers as well. One of our projects several years ago, right before the recession, was going to have all LEED Platinum certified buildings, LEED ND, you know, all of the sustainability bells and whistles. It would be, you know, noteworthy globally, and that developer found that to be in their best interest to do that. That was what they wanted to do. We also have worked on projects where the city said, well, you know, if you don't want to meet the stormwater requirements, then just put a green roof in. And so then the developer goes and runs the numbers and looks at what the impact on the pro forma, and, you know, it just didn't work for what they were looking to do. Didn't mean they had to go away and wouldn't do the project. It just meant that they, you know, needed to change what they're doing. And the real reason, you know, because I'm all about dreaming big and being aspirational, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, what I want to make sure is that as you have multiple goals, that sometimes may have, one has an impact on the other, and you have to decide how you want to prioritize. That's where it becomes really important, because what we've heard more than anything thus far is a concern about affordable housing. And so there are often instances when doing what's best for the environment is, a challenge to incorporate the affordability as well, because the developer doesn't just say, assuming, okay, I'm going to be crude here and assume that everything that we require of them that is green and sustainable costs more money. I know it doesn't, but let's just assume that it did. Then they adjust their pro forma so that not that they just take less profit, but they cut corners. They not just quality or whatever, but whereas they may have been including some affordability component. Thankfully, you have inclusionary zoning that's allowed by the state, so you can require 10% regardless. But the developers then, the equations and what they can do for people can be impacted. So my only suggestion is just to make sure that as we make the list of things that we want to include for sustainability, that you just, you have to look at it holistically across the board to ensure that you haven't, had a negative impact on something that was also a priority of yours. Leslie.
Hi, am I unmuted now?
You're great. We can hear you.
Okay, hi, my name is Leslie Gustafson. I am new to Norwalk, so thank you so much, everybody, for having me. I am not new to health and wellness in the built environment. That is what I do for a living. I am a well AP, and I am also on the Well Home Advisory for the International Well Building Institute, amongst other things. And I'm so happy to be on a call speaking to my neighbors, because it's great to be able to implement something that I do for a living at home and in my neighborhood. And to get caught up with really what's going on here is so important to me personally, and to our neighborhood. And I do have a couple of questions. And the one thing that I did ask, and Diane did answer, was, do we have any plan for when we will be net zero or getting to net zero? And she had said that doesn't exist yet. And my feeling is, if we can possibly put something into place, and I don't even know if this is possible at all, but then we all have a goal to kind of work towards. And then it makes sense to everybody when we start to put other different things in place to have green spaces and more biophilic design, and to start promoting, bringing in builders that are working towards LEED and towards WELL, et cetera, et cetera. If we just otherwise we're just kind of plucking at different things individually instead of all kind of honing in on one particular scope. And that would be, the Paris Agreement, where it's, zero carbon, net zero, by 2050. And I don't know if anybody else has thought about doing something like that for our town.
Yeah. Steve, any thoughts on that from the city's perspective?
Nothing, there's no concrete plans to do that. I think there's been some talk about, I don't think we have one person in-house that's kind of taken the lead on that, but I know we're talking about that internally, how we can staff that up a little bit more. I mean, up until a couple of years ago, the city hadn't really been talking about sustainability in the planning part of things. So when we started working on the citywide plan, which was done in 2019, I think that became a big focus. And so my staff has kind of realigned priorities internally in terms of, job descriptions, and additional staff on who's doing those kind of projects. So we're kind of moving in that direction. But city government, like any government, is not as nimble sometimes as other other entities. So we have to, work in different processes that others do. So that kind of slows us down a little bit more than we'd like sometimes.
Yeah, because at Greenbuild this year, everything is really getting towards, what's carbon, being carbon neutral. And I just think that would be a great overall focus for us. And there are so many builders and groups that are looking to start, projects at every scale, whether it's low-income housing or luxury home units that are looking to do things that are either green or fully sustainable from breaking ground to, the last picture hung on the wall. So I think that it's coming, and it's coming in a big way. And I think the sooner that we all, get committed to the process, I think the better off we'll all be in the end.
Great, thank you. Jaqueen.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
So there's been a lot of discussion on, greener, like bringing trees into the equation as well as park systems. I also want to interject that we need safer streets and safer pedestrian crossings. I am proposing that there actually be a stop sign at pedestrian crossings, because there are many that are accidents waiting to happen. There's some new ones that's cropped up around the city where people do not realize it's a pedestrian crossing and they do not stop, or they don't stop in time, and it causes kind of like a short stop for the car behind them. So I'm all for safer streets, safer crosswalks, better lighting, and better signage.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Tanner.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to bring up a topic that hasn't been addressed yet, and that's building materials. I'm not familiar enough with the current zoning code to know how friendly the code is, or whether it stipulates anything about the use of mass timber. But from what I understand, it's pretty hot right now in terms of being a very sustainable building method. Most of you may or may not know that building materials constitute 11% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and that comes largely from concrete. Concrete takes a ton. The construction of concrete emits a lot of greenhouse gases, whereas growing trees and then harvesting them obviously is a net negative for greenhouse gases, which is a good thing. Wood kind of got a bad rap as very susceptible to fire because of things like the Chicago fire over 100 years ago. Mass timber, though, is actually much safer than that. Additionally, it's very efficient in terms of insulation. There's a lot of other pros that I won't go into for the sake of time, but if there's anything in the zoning code that keeps developers from using mass timber, I think that should be reevaluated, and then potentially even incentives could be provided to encourage developers to use greener building materials like mass timber. So I wanted to mention that. And then one other thing, and it's similar enough to my first comment about dense development. I completely forgot to mention that it goes hand in hand with mixed use development. When you're in a dense community, but you still, all of your amenities are still far enough away that you have to drive, then that kind of defeats most of the purpose. And if you are in a less dense community, maybe single family homes, townhomes, but you do have amenities within walking distance because your neighborhood has a variety of uses, that goes a long way to shifting people out of their cars and getting them out walking around or biking around. That's something, just by way of personal anecdote, I live on Golden Hill, and there's one little tiny corner store that's in walking distance of my house that I visit from time to time, but I often wish that corner store was, there might be a couple of those, or that there's a grocery store I can walk to. There's a Stop and Shop that's about a mile walk, and I often bike to it, but seeing more mixed use, especially grocery stores, that just makes a huge difference for everybody, because everybody needs to shop for food, right? Getting more people within walking distance of a grocery store, of a pharmacy, of the errands they need to run for their day, I think would make a huge difference. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And one of the things that you'll often hear me talk about is, I said in my last statement, assuming for a minute that every green thing that we suggest costs the developers money. And then I said, we know that's not true, but, and so those sorts of things like the development pattern, the location of, things that you need on a daily basis that keep you from having to drive, if they're more, where you can walk to them. That all has a huge impact as well. And so I think I mentioned in one of the other meetings, the idea of the sort of original green versus gizmo green. And gizmo green tends to have some associated costs with it unless there's grants and different ways that those technologies are offset. But the original green, the things that people used to do because they had no choice if they wanted to be able to survive in their environment, things like passive solar and just how you orient your building, or like I said, having uses within walking distance of your home, so you don't have to drive to everything. And so a lot of those things we can do don't have any associated costs with them. And then also as we look at stormwater, sustainable stormwater tends to be less expensive than conventional stormwater because you aren't paying for these giant pipes and you're having to move the water here and there, and then there's so much built infrastructure to go along with it, as opposed to letting the grounds do what it was meant to do, and that's be a sponge and soak up and breathe and absorb the water. So a lot of those things are very easy to start to incorporate without people being concerned about it, and without you having to really make any choices and trade-offs. So that's always a good starting point. So thank you for mentioning that, Tanner. All right, who else? I don't see any other hands up. How are we doing on time?
We are 8 minutes over.
Oh,
Well, Steve's got us
no
down.
wonder. Everybody's finished up already. We're going. All right, go ahead, Steve. And then Lynn has her hand up as well.
Sure, and this is not meant to put a damper on everybody's enthusiasm. Just keep in mind that zoning is not the to-all, end-all for everything of life's problems. There's lots of other rules and regulations and agencies that have jurisdictions, powers, duties, responsibilities to deal with some of these issues. Just like, I'm reading some of the comments in the chat, which are all very interesting, but a lot of these might be building code issues and broader citywide policy initiatives that need to come from the top down. So just try to keep that in mind. This is just one process of many.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Steve. Lynn.
I'd love it if you could tell us what comes next, because I think this is the last one of these meetings, right? So is there plan for further process like in a few months for the public to see what's going on? Just can you let us know about that?
Sure.
Yeah, so I can fill you in on that. So actually, you don't have to wait a few months. You just have to wait 2 days. So on Thursday evening at 6 p.m., we've got our work in progress meeting. So that's kind of a compilation of like everything we've heard and all the work that we've been doing over the past week. And that we call it work in progress because while it's presenting to you all what we've heard and what we've done the last week, it's still a chance for you all to provide feedback. So we highly recommend that if you all can attend, please spread the word about that, because that'll be a really important one to attend as well. And all that is on the zonenorwalk.com website. So that meeting is up there to register for.
During that work in progress presentation, you'll actually, we're working on plans that we're drawing to illustrate these ideas about how to do infill or how to address some of the challenges that we've been hearing from the community. And so we're actually taking some sites from around the city and drawing a specific plan for that area. And then our artists, our renderers doing, drawings that we'll actually do before and after, and really be able to assess whether or not the things that the way we've been hearing you, whether or not it's represented and representative of what you're saying. And so we'll have all that work we've presented. We'll be, talking about a bigger picture sort of zoning strategies that we've been developing based on the input we've been receiving this week. And then when we're all finished with that presentation, we'll just open it up for Q&A as we always do. So we'll just chat as long as you all have hands to raise. And then from there, we'll take all of that and start working on the draft of the document that will be presented when the public draft comes out, and then it'll go through the official adoption process. So there's many, many, many more opportunities throughout the next several months to be involved. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I'll let you all go and have your dinner now. We appreciate your time. And please tell your friends that this is going on, or have them come out and participate. You know, this is a nice turnout for a meeting like this, but considering that we're actually writing a zoning ordinance for the entire city, you know, sometimes I think that, you know, if everyone really was aware of what we're doing, not that they haven't heard about it, because the city's done a really good job getting the word out, but if they really thought about what we were doing, then we would have, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on these Zooms. So nonetheless, let people know, and we'll see you